you spend more than 2 hours on a classic full set or more than 3 hours on a volume full set, you're going to want to listen to today's episode as I share 7 ways that you can increase your lash speed without sacrificing quality. That's right. On this episode, I'm going to talk about some do's and don'ts when lashing that can help you cut down the time on your sets and your fills and get you more clients because you have more time to fit them in. So before we dive into today's lesson about increasing your speed for lashing, I do want to have a little bit of a disclaimer. I want to make sure that I'm setting your expectations in reality as to what is kind of standard average timing for lashing full sets and for fills for our industry. Because I don't want you thinking that, oh, I need to be getting to an hour for a full set for anything. The people that can do a full set in an hour, more power to them, but for the most part, they're either using diameters that are very, very, very thick, and so they can get a fuller look in a shorter amount of time, or maybe there's sacrificing quality, or maybe they've been doing this for years and it's just on autopilot. So I don't want you to be thinking that you have to achieve this full set in an hour. That's not what the point of today is. I want to make sure that we are addressing what industry standard is. That doesn't mean that everybody's doing this range, but it's what we expect most lash artists to finish a full set or a fill in. So industry standard for classic full sets is anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours at about 90% coverage. A 2 to 3 week fill for classic is anywhere from an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. Volume ranges from 3.5, sometimes 4 hours. And then volume fill in a 2 to 3 week time frame would be about an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe 2 hours, 15 minutes. So those are kind of industry standards for average. Mega volume obviously is going to take a lot more time. If you're getting 100% coverage every single time, maybe it takes you a little bit longer. But I really want to shed some light on some things that you can be doing that can speed up your time, or identifying the things that are taking up a lot of time that are really unnecessary. So if you're not within those ranges, or you want to get on the lower end of those ranges, stay tuned because we're going to talk about that right now. So what not to do. So tip number 1, excessive talking with your clients. Now, catching up with clients is great. I would typically catch up with my clients while I was prepping them, while I was getting everything set up and ready to go, washing their lashes, rinsing their lashes. We would catch up on what was happening in their world. But as soon as the iPads went on, it's rest time, night-night. See you in about an hour. So I would make sure that as I'm placing the lash or the pads for my client, we would start to wrap up the conversation. You know, if they were talking a lot or really excited, I need you to calm down. You know, I need to place this and make sure I don't get into your bottom lashes popping up. Your cheekbones are going to move the iPad if you continue to talk. So let's just have some quiet time and some rest time. Once you get to a point in your lashing where isolation is second nature to you, you've got a lot of muscle memory, then you can start to talk a little bit during your appointments and it won't slow you down. But for the most part, most lash artists need to be able to focus without interacting and engaging with their clients while they're lashing. That doesn't mean that you can't talk before and after the appointment or when you're wrapping things up or taking a break or whatever. But for you to be efficient, you need to cut down on the amount of time you spend talking. This also means that you need to, in a polite and courteous way, tell them to put their damn phone away. You are not their receptionist. You don't need to tell them that, you know, oh, it's your husband. No, it's not. Oh, it's a number you don't know. Or yes, I can text them back. Or, oh, gosh, I didn't get it in time. Oh, can you call them back? No, I'm here to lash you. You're paying me to lash you. You can also take the different approach of, I can be your secretary, but you're paying me to lash you. So what would you prefer? So having a tactful way to invite your clients to leave their phone in their purse or have a charging station where they're not on their phone while they're lashing, it's going to save you a lot of time instead of being a secretary, because we've all been there until we're like, this is enough. The second, what not to do is excessive fluffing. So if you don't know what fluffing is, here, I've got my tweezers. I don't know if this is something that's taught in a lash course or it's just like this weird habit the lash artists naturally pick up, but it's where you're just kind of fluffing through the lashes after you've placed one. So as we isolate, right, we spread the lashes, the natural lashes apart. And then for some oddball reason, I see this a lot in newer lash artists, they'll take their tweezers up and then they'll kind of sift through endlessly, just kind of fluffing through the lashes. when really you should be isolating, placing as you're holding, look for the next one and keep moving on. So this endless fluffing, really, if you're doing that after every single lash placement, that's 5 seconds per lash that you're wasting. And over an entire full set, if you're doing 75 to 80 lashes, you do the math, that's a lot of time you're wasting aimlessly fluffing the lashes. Secondly would be excessive brushing. How many times are you picking up your spoolie and just brushing and brushing? And then my favorite part is we brush, 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 and then we get out the dental mirror and then we go, oh, I need to take a selfie. And so we get the camera out and we take a picture of this perfect 5D fan. How much time are you wasting by doing that? Yes, you do want to brush the lashes throughout the appointment to make sure they're lined up, to make sure that there's not any weird wonky ones, but at a minimum. So my habit was every time I would go to replace my glue drop, which was about every 10 to 20 minutes, just depending on my humidity, I would then, because my hands were free and I didn't have to do any more maneuvering of the tweezers, I would then pick up the spoolie and brush through. Or you can do it, if you bounce from eye to eye, go 4 or 5 sections on one eye, bounce over to the other eye, do 4 or 5 sections, and then go through and brush. But you shouldn't be brushing, in a full set, you should be brushing maybe 5 or 6 times throughout the set. If you're brushing more than that, then let's try and cut that back and understand why it is that you're brushing through them so much. Is it that you're really trying to get a complicated design? If you're trying to get a complicated design, but you're still taking 2.5 to 3 hours for a classic set, let's walk before we can run. Let's get your timing down first, and then we can start getting more advanced techniques. Lastly, for the what not to do's, and this may be an unpopular one with you veterans, and that's okay, but for your newbies, you do not need to lash 100% of the natural lashes. I know, I said it. Oh, dear Lord. For some of you, it's a great thing to everybody, it's a great thing to aspire to, but in reality, if it takes you an extra 30 to 45 minutes to get to 100% coverage versus 80% coverage, your clients are not really that likely to see much of a difference between 80% coverage and 100% coverage. But they are definitely going to notice an extra 30 to 45 minutes of having to lay there quietly and still when it's already been 2.5 hours, right? So my suggestion is aim for as much coverage as possible in the set standard time that you have allotted for that service. So make sure that you have standard service timing for every service, and you're going to get as much coverage as you can during that time frame. And if you are still on the newer side of lashing and isolation is still a struggle for you, do not even talk about getting 100% coverage anywhere in your marketing or to a client. Wait until you can get your time done in isolation on point, and then you can start talking about 100% coverage and using that maybe as a unique selling point against your lash counting competition, right? But we want to make sure that we are prioritizing timing so that you can have standard times before we start saying we're going to get 100% coverage, because everybody has different number of natural lashes, right? Some clients have 80, some have 150. So just saying that you're going to get 100% coverage for every client that walks through the door, you can't gauge how long it's going to take you. So how are you going to have any consistency in booking clients if you're aiming for a percentage of coverage when everybody is different? And oh, by the way, not every lash should be lashed. There are some lashes you can leave alone not to lash. So what do you do to pick up on some time? The first tip I'm going to give you is for preparation and setup. This is hugely important and something that you should be prioritizing from the get-go. No matter how long you've been lashing, this should always be something that you are on top of. There's no excuse for this, in my opinion. You should always be prepared for the next client as soon as they walk over to the treatment table. Now, if they show up early, they need to wait until you're ready for that, because as soon as they get on the treatment table, guess what? Their clock is ticking. They are expecting you to be done in your standard time of an hour. And if you're still getting tweezers out of your sanitizer and you're still picking out lashes or putting lashes away or changing whatever from the last client, that client is already just waiting there for you to finish up and you're kind of wrestling around. So I would have them wait in the lobby area or your waiting area or wherever, but not come to the actual bed until you are ready to go. So as soon as they hit the bed, you're ready to go. It's going to be the 60 minutes or the 75 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it's going to be from the second they lay down. So they're not waiting there because they'll start to get impatient. So I want you to also evaluate your current setup as to where things are placed in relation to your hands and your client's head. So there's a lot of pillows now, and I used I actually used a clipboard under my client's head with 2 layers of memory foam on top of it to make my bed wider, so that I had my palette and my jade stone right next to their head, so that I wasn't having to reach really far away or go all the way over here to get something every time. Because if you're having to fan way over here and then isolate over here and then come back here, you know, it's just precious seconds. And if we're doing that, remember, we're doing 85, 100, 150 natural lashes. Those seconds add up into minutes, and it could be 10, 15 minutes added to appointment when all it takes is just moving that bad boy a little bit closer. Now, there used to be the hot thing of the glue rings. I actually don't like glue rings for liability purposes because your glue is moving across the client's head as it's on your hand. So I'm not a huge fan of glue rings. Plus, I think it gives you kind of this false sense of you don't have to replace the glue drop because there's so much in there. But actually what's happening is it's curing more glue. So I don't like it. And I also don't like that the fumes are so close to your breathing area. So I don't recommend glue rings, but having the jade stone right next to the client's head, obviously watching out for their hair, and having the palette close by or on the back of your hand is a quicker way to speed up your lashing. Tip number 6, map it. For you newbies and for you veteran artists, if you are not mapping out on the iPad your lash map, you are wasting so much time trying to figure out what length is going where and what curls going where. Seriously, a lash map is the #1 tip I can give everybody to start doing. When your client gets their iPads on and they've settled down, that's the time for you to draw out your map. Even if you're not super advanced or familiar with eye styling and you're not going that advanced, just even writing down 8, 10, 12, and what sections they're in are going to make your life so much easier. For me, I actually would lash in each section on one eye, go to the next, lash in each section. So I knew I was actually getting equal amounts of lashes on each eye rather than, and this is a matter of preference, if you do this, it's fine, but a lot of people will fill up one eye to full and then try to either make up time or, you know, the second eye is just not getting nearly as much attention. Or we also have very different amounts of lashes. We can have very different amounts of lashes on both sides. So if you're doing 100% coverage on both sides, some clients, it may look very odd on them because they only have, you know, 70 on this eye, but they have 100 on this eye. And so one looks a little bit fuller, and then they start to complain that they don't look the same or that it's not as full, whatever. We've all heard it. So I do recommend that you lash map and you keep track of where you're lashing, so that you're automatically picking out the next lash, picking out the next lash. You place it, you're looking in the next section. Where's the easiest lash? Always find the easiest lash, right? We don't need to make this really complicated by digging through layers of lashes. If there's one right on top, start with all the ones on top. Which leads me into my last tip, which is isolation. That is what takes the longest to master as a lash artist, and by far the hardest thing that we do as lash artists. Now, for those of you that are struggling with isolation, I promise you it does become easier the more you practice and the more you get all sorts of different lash types in. It will be something that you can do in your sleep eventually. Going through enough lashes, it will become easier. So you have hope. But I do have some tips for you in a download that you can get today, which I'll talk about in just a second, for ways to make isolation a lot easier. But my trick for speeding up your isolation is not only while you've placed one fan or one extension and it's taking that 2 to 3 seconds to dry, or 1 to 2 seconds, is again, look where you're going to head next, pick out the easiest lash. Then once you've done that enough times, tape is your best friend. I taped every single client's lids up. So I would place a little bit of the Next Care blue sensitive tape on their lid skin, and I would just ever so slightly pull it up and tape it above their brow. Now, we want to make sure that we're double checking to make sure that the client's eye didn't pop open. It still needs to be sealed. But especially for women with hooded eyes, that was a super easy way to get the lashes to kind of settle out so they weren't all on top of each other. You can also pull the tape off to the side towards their temple. And a great tip I got from Hillary Brand many, many moons ago was actually have the client, when you're getting towards the end or you want to do the inner corners, have the client pull their lid skin towards their temple, because they will pull a lot harder than you ever will. And plus you get a third hand. We could all use a third hand in life. much less for lashing, right? So it really is helpful to have the client participate, especially if you're getting towards the end of the set and they're starting to wake up and you're starting to finish up, they're already awake and they can kind of help you really splay out those inner corner lashes that are so tricky to get to. And then lashing the babies. I would go through the first 5 or 10 minutes of any full set and I would just lash all the impossibly tiny lashes. If they needed a lash, I would use a 0.03 or 0.05 and match the length and just get those bad boys easier to isolate, because those are the ones that are going to stick to the other lashes if they don't have an extension already on them. And they're very, very hard to isolate because they're so teeny tiny. And then lastly, change your view. It's okay to move the client's head back and forth. It's okay for you to get up or change your position. I had a chair that went up and down. I had a bed that went up and down. I was constantly, towards the end, always kind of moving around to make sure that I could see all of the lashes in whatever direction they were going. You can also, with the tape, pull the extensions back to get different layers. So if you want more tips on how to increase your speed and learn how I go more in depth on the 7 tips that I've given you today, you can download my free lash speed guide at thelashpreneur.com/lashspeed. So think about it. If you work on all 7 of these tips, or even if you just pick out a couple, and you could shave your full sets down by up to maybe even an hour, that would free you up for 1 more client in a day. And if you could get 1 more client in a day and you work 4 days a week, say you charge $50 for a fill client, so you could get a new fill client in every single day that you work, that's up to $900 more a month that you could be doing if you can get your time under control. Now, again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I don't want you sacrificing quality. This really is prioritizing quality and then time, because of what we do is a craft. It's an art. It's not meant to be rushed. However, we do, time is money. We do have to be efficient with our time. So those are 7 suggestions for you to increase your lashing speed. Again, you can get more in-depth information and some other tips and strategies I have for increasing your lash speed at thelashpreneur.com/lashspeed. Until I see you next time, happy business building. Have a good one.